may still trickle in, but we will get started. Welcome, everybody, to 440 Gallery's Artist Talk. Today, we are featuring David Stock's solo show, Organized Chaos. It's going to be up through June 25th. And also in the project space, we have On the Way to Abstraction, featuring Leigh Blanchard, Amanda Michele Brown, and Robin Roy. As always, I will encourage you to try to see the shows in person. Really amazing work to be able to get up close and personal with, but I'm really happy that we can have this method of seeing the work today and talk to the artists in person. So let me remind you also that if you have questions, please put them in the chat or save them as we go along, and I'm going to ask my questions, and then when we're finished, we'll turn it to the group here to ask whatever they'd like to ask. So let's get started. We'll take a look at the installation. Get a little taste of the putting the show up, what it looks like now. As part of the installation committee myself, it's always fun to see how we can get the work to really sing by what how we can show it to its best advantage in pairings or in groupings. And David's show is incredible. There he is. And we get a little taste of the reception in case you missed it. So it's nice to the people in the room, you can get an idea of the scale of the work. Oh, and the different sizes and how wonderful it is to have these nice large prints of David's. Now here's David's images. Wow. Okay. So David, congratulations on a really wonderful show. I noticed that these pieces are just exquisitely detailed and unpeopled, yet they tell many stories. And I'd like to start with the title, Organized Chaos. This term seems to function on several levels. Can you talk about your intentions, please? Don't forget to unmute, David.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. And it's wonderful to see folks here. I see that Switzerland is in the house and folks from the West Coast and from all over. So thanks so much for coming. It really means a lot to me. I don't want to make too much of a title, but it does seem like we live in a chaotic time. And I certainly live in a chaotic city. In fact, sometimes I'm not sure why it doesn't just fly apart, but somehow it keeps going. And in fact, sometimes can be incredibly beautiful. I feel I've been thinking lately that one of the purposes of art is to respond to chaos. That we have to try to figure out where do we sit within the chaos, and is there some way to communicate through the chaos? So I think one of the important things about art is that it offers a possibility of sharing emotion and points of view, even within a chaotic world. And on a much more practical level, the kind of photography I'm doing is taking this very chaotic visual environment of my neighborhood in Queens and trying to distill it into very personal images that are also very organized. So maybe for me personally, it's a way of confronting chaos by bringing disorder into order.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you're not actually like eliminating any of the chaos or changing anything. You're just finding a view that can work for your point of view. And that kind of brings me to my next question. I wanted to move to technique. So your photography is so distinctive. Can you tell the viewers here what your technical considerations are? Like, how do you put your photos together?
Well, I think I'd like to talk about my process, and I think technique comes into that. But one of the most important things that's happened to me in the last couple of years is that my photography has become this daily practice that's very fluid. I go out pretty much every day with my camera. I do these loops through the neighborhoods near me, Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, Corona, and I know there's another one, must be Woodside. And I walk a couple of miles. I always find images. And I feel like kind of what's happened is that I'm in a groove with my work. I come back, I work on the files, I make proof prints of various kinds. And the prints then inform what I do with the camera. In other words, when I go out and I see something, I see it how it's going to look as a final print, because it's become second nature to me. That I've been using the same ink set and the same paper for a long time. I'm very familiar with the color palette, with my own preferences. So it's almost like I can pre-visualize the print on the scene, or at least what its potential is. And I feel like it's this feedback loop that's very productive for me. And because it's coming easy, because it's a daily practice, almost like meditation or yoga or martial arts, it frees me to pay more attention to the emotional content of the work. I think it's made me a better photographer that way. It's actually pushed aside a lot of questions about technique and, the friction that comes from trying to figure out what you're doing. And this has only happened a few times in my life when the work has flowed really easily. So that's one of the important things that's happened in the last couple of years. It's interesting. I revisit the same areas over and over again because it's all within walking distance. Everything in the show is within a couple of miles of my home. So I walk a couple of miles a day. And everything has been done in the last year and a half. So I figure I've probably walked at least 1,000 miles of loops in these neighborhoods, often passing by the same things over and over. And it's kind of an interesting process, but it's been very productive for me.
That's awesome. Thank you. That gives us some insight. And when I look at your work, I think of craftsmanship, which is really more of a painterly consideration, maybe, but I do feel like your work is very painterly. And so what I wanted to ask is, your craftsmanship extends to the presentation as well. Can you talk about how you mounted these larger pieces? And also let us know if the work is available in different sizes.
I'll answer the second question first. Everything is available in all different sizes, framed or unframed. If somebody really likes one of the images but can't deal with a large print, I can make a small one, and I can help with presentation and framing stuff too. For a couple of years, I've been interested in showing the work kind of naked, not behind glass. I'm interested in the physicality of the prints, the texture of the paper, how the ink kind of lays on top of the paper, but also sinks into the paper a little bit. And I want people to be able to experience that if possible. So I've been experimenting with different ways of hanging the work without glass. And this is the latest experiment. I ran across a place in Gowanus that does art boards. This is maple boards, sanded, unfinished. And it just clicked in my mind. I thought, I'll try this. So this is my latest experiment, and other people will have to tell me how well it works.
Well, I think it's really beautiful. And I hope you've had some good response in at the opening and people coming to the gallery.
I definitely have, and thank you.
And now let's talk about something that really fascinates me. How do you choose your subject matter for each photo? So what inspires you in general, and where do you see this going? And sort of a combination question also, is this series going to close, or are you like shooting several series at once, or do you just keep them open-ended and have different series that hit you at different times?
Well, I'm really attracted by visual energy of the animate qualities of inanimate things. So when I see something that kind of comes to life for me, It reaches out with its energy. I'm very attracted to that. I'm also obviously really attracted to dense detail, to tangles of wire, to downspouts, to graffiti. But a lot is because those things have some energy and movement in them. James, maybe could we look at that dancing wires picture? I can maybe talk about that a little, just to get an idea of, you know, what attracts me and how it works for me. But I passed by this scene many times before I photographed it. And of course, on this particular day, it had just rained. So all those dark areas appeared, and even the other parts of the stucco, the kind of texture came out more. And so it acquired a kind of depth. And once that was set up, then the wires really started to move for me. And they started to sort of evoke some feelings. So all of a sudden, this situation completely changed. And I saw it in the camera. I knew what it was going to be. So that's just an example of how it works. Sometimes a situation will just jump out at me. I'll come around a corner and it's just there, and I know it has all the elements and kind of the imagery that I need to say something.
Well, and they're very
Go ahead.
humorous elements, maybe.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Humor often kind of opens the door for me. It isn't necessarily the end point of the work, but it's definitely part of the work. And sometimes it's kind of the first thing that grabs me, is how absurd, or certainly I'm attracted by contradictions. I'm attracted by things that don't seem to belong together, paradoxes, or even visual puns. So that is definitely an important part of my work. But one thing I should mention that kind of ties all this work together is that I'm very interested in the marks that are left by human activity. When I'm photographing in the city, everything that's there to look at is the result of human activity. Somebody had an intent, a reason, whether it's a good reason or a bad reason, for making that happen. And then sometimes those things just get left stranded and become part of a layer of the visual city. And I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by all the labor and all the intent that goes into these things that sometimes turn out to be kind of crazy or kind of strange, unintentionally so. So this whole issue of human activity, I think, is a big commonality in my work.
Yes, and I like that that it's very poetic how you portray it. It doesn't have judgment in it. It might be humorous, but you're not making fun of the activity itself. The activity is just there for you to see. You're just observing it.
Yeah, I actually feel like all of this labor and intent has a lot of dignity to it, that sometimes it adds up to something that nobody could have foreseen. In fact, you could almost generalize that about the city as a whole and how it looks. But it's certainly not something I'm making fun of. So James, is there any chance we could go back to that gate photograph?
Is
Is this the one you mean?
No, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the one with the tangled wires. This,
Oh.
this is another gate, but
See.
yeah,
This one.
that one. So this is again something I walked by many times. And then possibly because of the light, or possibly because something changed, I actually stopped and looked at it. And it just started to really affect me. I mean, I started wondering, like, who put all these wires and chains here? And were they really trying to close off the gate so people couldn't go through? And it seems so crazy. I mean, it's so dense and tangled, and it stopped being just part of the grunge of the urban environment, and it started being this iconic thing to me, where it really was ugly, but it was also really kind of beautiful. And it was maybe a gate, but also some other kind of gate. And I started feeling an affinity for this. So that's the kind of thing that can happen, and that I'm looking for all the time, where by focusing on something, it kind of pulls it out of its normal associations. And even though it keeps its integrity as something that really exists, it takes on a kind of metaphor or some iconic quality. So that's really an example of what I'm going for. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of work in realizing it as a final print, but it's all trying to get back to that original vision, the thing I saw when I was there.
Yeah, there's something about the clarity of it and the way that you've honored it, that, like you said, it keeps it, it gives it dignity. And then that allows us to look at it more closely. And whereas if we were walking by it, we wouldn't have seen it that way. That's why it's so special that you chose this.
Thank you.
Really beautiful work, David. Thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be some more questions after we go to the project space. So let's take a look at the work in the project space. I'm impressed you know which slide it is. On the way to abstraction. And we'll take a look at Leigh Blanchard's work. So Leigh, congratulations on a beautiful show in the project space. Your work is always fascinating. Can you tell us what inspired this series?
Sure, yeah, thank you. I would say that this series of work, alongside like probably majority of the work that I make, was just kind of all out of experimentation, making some mistakes, kind of messing around with sometimes I work with a lens and with a form of photography, and other times more digital imagery, but always about kind of experimentation and very process oriented work. This series, though, the intention was to work with the kind of same technique that I'd been using before, called scanography, but to make images that were less digital looking. So my goal with these works were to make something that looked more like a painting or a watercolor, or really just something where the person viewing the piece wasn't really sure what kind of medium it was that they were looking at. I really love when people sort of have that reaction to the work, and I do think like photography and digital imagery in general just have like such a variety to the works that can be shown in that one medium. So I like to kind of push the boundaries of that.
And I'll say very successfully.
Oh, thanks.
These are very painterly, and you did touch on this a little bit, but we can't talk about your work without asking, like, how the heck did these come about? So could you get a little more specific about the process of scanography?
Yeah, definitely. So it starts with a scanogram, and for those who haven't worked with that before, basically it's the process of creating a digital image with a scanner. So I'll take like a flatbed scanner, and as the light moves across the bed, I'm placing materials, objects, old photographs I found, photographs I've made before, and then putting those on the bed of the scanner as the light goes across and making a new image. So this process was interesting, and kind of, as I said before, like making mistakes is a big part of the process. And this series started, my initial idea was sort of the concept of making like a diptych on the scanner on one, like as the light's going across, like making a diptych in one image. And didn't really go where I wanted to, but you can actually kind of see like some remnants of them. Like in this image, for example, on the right, you see like that kind of white band in the middle that initially went all the way across, and it was like a white space that divided each image, and there was two images on either side. So that was the case for all the images. That just kind of like remnant stayed there. But so after trying that out, I wasn't exactly happy with the results, but I mean, that's like part of the process, is always kind of like making a few mistakes along the way. And that's when I got the idea, like, why does this have to look so harsh and digital, and the sharp lines between one and another? I'm really want to try and challenge myself to kind of blend everything together and kind of get rid of those harsh lines and make some more soft lines. So yeah, that was the process of doing that was sort of a digital and physical manipulation of the image, and printing images and kind of rescanning and going through that process until I was happy with the end result.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah.
So I always find your lovely image very evocative. It's non-specific, but suggestive of a lot of things. I would like to know how you think about the ambiguous spaces and the imagery. Are there like more in this series that didn't make the cut because they don't have these kind of ambiguous qualities, or do the variations suggest like a different series? And I know this is a lot of questions in one, but Are you more led by what you want the imagery to be like, or are the happy accidents leading the way?
Yeah, so the first question was about sort of like ambiguity, and I would say I've always been drawn to abstraction. I'm not sure all the reasons why, but I know one of them is that I think concentrating on like just form, color, light, shadow, all these sort of formal elements is like, that's the most important part of an image to me. So, and really like concentrating on that without kind of a more figurative distraction is just what I've found myself attracted to visually. And there's definitely images that don't make the cut, and it's not always because they start to resemble something. A lot of times it's just not quite visually hitting for some reason. I think probably everyone here would say they have kind of a instinct like that as well, where it's like, this one's out, not sure why, but it is. And then yeah, overall I would say like I'm mostly led, I think, by happy accidents. There's definitely been series in the past where there's like kind of an emotional or like a feeling that I want people to have, or maybe like a narrative that I kind of want people to get to at some point. But most of the time I'm just kind of experimenting, and I'm coming up with a new way to create an image that is a little bit confusing, but beautiful to me. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, these images are very satisfying.
Thanks.
And now we're going to move on to Amanda Michele Brown. So let's take a look at Amanda's work. Beautiful, thank you. So Amanda, congratulations on your work in this interesting show. I'm struck with the title, On the Way to Abstraction. Can you speak to how your work fits in with this?
Yeah, so that title was something that the three of us kind of struggled to get to, but Robin was the one who recommended it, and I just really like the idea of seeing each of our pieces as like a waypoint on a path to a fictional place of ultimate abstraction, anywhere from like starting out with a little bit more representation. You can like see some hints of forms. Once you guys will see Robin's work, you'll see that it's abstract, but you can see the real life that was pulled from it, to like Leigh and I's work, which is you start to struggle a little bit more to like ground it in reality. So my work specifically is more about less about the physical space and more about like mental and emotional. And I like the idea of thinking of that as like a point along this path that would be really fun and kind of trippy to walk down.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Thank you. These pieces have a very different feeling than the work in your recent solo show. Can you talk about your evolution, and what do these changes suggest for the future?
So for those of you who didn't see my solo show, it was kind of a little bit of the inverse of this. The like forms were all in the positive space, and having just gone through all that, I didn't want to show the same thing, something similar to what I had just recently shown. So I had been kind of mulling over this series recently that thinks a little bit more along the lines of the negative space. So all my work deals with memory and feeling and emotion, and trying to create structure around those kind of intangible things. And so I was also trying to think about like, what about situations where there is like emotion and nostalgia tied up in something, but you've also forgotten it. So the things that kind of come to mind are like your best friend's home phone number that you would always like call to see if you could come over. The like street that your like elementary school was on, things that were like at one point engraved in your brain, but now have kind of floated away. Like what do we do to kind of like build up those spaces that now remain in our memories, but still keep the like core of it, the feelings, the emotions, the connections that we have to those memories, even if it's not as like full and robust. And that's kind of different from the previous work, because that was all based around like more current memories and feelings. Ones where if I wasn't grappling with the idea of like, there's something I'm not quite remembering about this. And it wasn't really about remembering it like 100%, obviously. It was more about like the essence of it. But I think that there's just something interesting about like finding out the missing pieces in our life, and how do we represent those visually.
Oh, that's so interesting, and it kind of leads me, or sort of answers my last question, but I find these pieces luminous and also have an air of mystery. And these qualities make me think of poetic narrative. And so I was going to ask if you attach a narrative meaning to these, and what you're saying is you do. I wonder, like, how have you titled these? Like, are you wanting to kind of nail down that specific thing, or are you going more abstract?
At this point, each individual one is kind of more about the concept than about like a specific instance. So these are very creatively titled, like absence number 1, absence number 2, absence number 3. But with most of my work, I do have that like actual moment that I'm tapping into. So just because this is like very early in the process, I haven't quite gotten to the point where I feel like I can fully represent, like, to use the example I already had, like my childhood best friend's phone number, like an instance where that would come up. That hasn't really been
But just yeah, the idea of absence is and looking at this is poetic, and maybe it doesn't need that extra elaboration, and maybe that is the sort of poetic abstraction. So
Yeah.
Well done, Amanda.
Thank you.
Really beautiful. Thank you. So now we're going to move to Robin Roy. Let's take a look at her pieces in the show. So Robin, congratulations on these impressive pieces included in On the Way to Abstraction. Can't seem to get that word out. What's the play of abstraction and recognizable imagery? Can you tell us about your relationship to abstraction here?
Yeah. I rarely do anything that's totally abstract. I don't know that I mean, very, very few occasions where it's not referencing something actual around my house or in nature, or in the general environment. I'm looking and drawing from what's around me. And this is my dining room, kitchen area of my house. I did, I did this drawing in 2017. And believe it or not, it's the exact same drawing as the second one. They have this exact same image. I just traced my original drawing and flipped it around. And so this is like the, you know, the opposite, the chair, the large chair in the front is on the right in this one, and in the last one, it's on the left. And I actually did 2 drawings at the time in 2017. I did the 2 drawings. And then this year, I just was I was never happy with that second drawing. And I wanted to play around with it. I didn't really care if I ruined it. And so I just went at it and changed it. And now it's completely different from the first one, even though they're the same image. But I like the way it is not, it's not immediately recognizable. I think it's a little bit confusing visually, and I like that. And it's sort of, I like the fact that you have to kind of really try hard to pick out the images. And for me, that abstraction is preferable to something that's totally realistic. I have no desire to make a completely realistic drawing.
Well, I think it's very successful because it really pulls you in and gets you to spend time with the intricacy of this work. So I also love the homey imagery and the nostalgic associations that come with the wallpaper, and I see the butterick pattern in this one. Can you tell us about your inspiration and the execution of these pieces?
The butterick dressmaking pattern is another way to kind of for one, to layer up the image, and also to add even more abstraction. So it's cutting through and drawing. I also like the way the lines in this are not my lines. They're actually the lines from the dressmaking pattern. And the paper is so transparent, it's tissue paper. So when I apply it on top of my drawing with and attach it with matte medium, the paper itself just goes completely transparent. And what you're left with are all the dots and dashes and lines and words that break up that drawing in the background even more. So I use this.
But just to be clear, that's the actual pattern that you've just laid on there and attached.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a dress. I cut it up, so it's just abstract. I mean, it's not a pattern of a particular dress or something.
It almost looks like you drew it because it's so integral to the picture.
Right, and I like that. I like that it looks like I drew those lines, and I didn't. So that's just, and I use that technique pretty often in my work.
And could you tell us about the wallpaper as well?
I have a collection of old wallpapers, and I also like the nostalgic quality of it. Just reminds me of my childhood, and I mean, I think it would remind everyone of their childhood of a certain age, right?
Right.
And actually, so the first piece is just framed traditionally, just like I would frame most of my pieces on paper. But like David, I have been experimenting with different ways of exhibiting the work. And I'm just become tired of that rectangular container. It's so rigid, and I'm tired of the rigidity of it. So I decided I wanted to just completely do without the frame. And this picture in particular is a little bit misleading because it's got this blue background that is just the wall. It's in my studio, it's the wall. So it's not the best photograph. If you see the actual show, you'll see that this image is floating about 1.5 inches from the wall. So the entire piece, it's, the drawing is on a piece of paper. I glued that to the wallpaper. And then on the back of the whole thing, I have attached canvas. So it's got some heft to it. It has some real, it has some weight. And if there's, I don't know if there's a picture of it on the wall. Yeah, there we go. That's good. Thank you. So, and then I cut out the shape, just mimicking the shape of the actual drawing. It's just a duplicate of that outside shape of the drawing. And then I have attached on the back side a wood frame that holds it away from the wall. Like I said, about 1.5 inches away from the wall. So it has a nice bit of shadow in the right lighting. You can see a little bit of shadow there, but with more of a direct lighting coming down, it would cast a shaped shadow. So that's kind of a new direction that I've been going in, and this is the first one I've done that way. And now I've done several other drawings that or collages. I never know what to call them because they're very mixed media. So I do call them mixed media, but they're all initially done on paper, and then I back them with canvas. And so I'm doing completely without any glass or frame on top of it.
Yeah, and that's so interesting that the wallpaper itself becomes a frame.
Yeah.
And so you've led me to my next question. So I was wondering if these were recent. So that's a recent piece.
Well, in a way, it's funny because, I mean, both of these were, the drawing itself was done in 2017. So this was done, I did 2 of them at the same time. I worked on 2 of the same image and just treated them very differently. And then this past year, I took the other one, and the other one looks completely different from the way it looked when I first did it. So it's an entirely different, there was no color in it. It was actually white. It was like more like a line drawing. And I think I was kind of bored with it. So I added the color and I added more layers, and there's underneath is some Japanese writing. I don't know if you can see that, but it's all very layered up. And then the color is with watercolor and colored pencil and oil crayon. And then that whole thing was cut out and layered onto the wallpaper.
So beautiful. And so is this inspiring your next move? What's next for you, and how's your wallpaper supply holding out?
Well, I mean, I already have done I don't know, 5 or 6 other pieces that are done in the same way, and they all involve the wallpaper. And you're right, I'm running out. I'm gonna have to resupply somehow. It's also very old. The wallpaper is extremely old, which is why I think I initially started backing them with canvas, because I needed to hold them together. They're very fragile. And now, I mean, this is not fragile because it's got layers and layers of glue and matte medium and canvas, and it's very well held together. So, but yeah, I've done about 5 or 6 new pieces. And I'm going to be showing them as part of my show that is about a year from, well, next April is my solo show.
Okay, something to look forward to. Thank you, Robin. Really beautiful.
Thank you.
So now we can open up. Let's see what's in the chat, and we'll open questions to the group. Oh, quite a few things in the chat here. So let's see. Leigh Blanchard says, I have a question for David. The placement of the subject matter in your work often looks so perfect. I'm wondering if you ever move anything around before taking a picture. For example, the image of the toy car and the flower pot. The flower pot is so perfectly placed in the graffiti silhouette on the wall. That's an interesting question, David.
You mean move what's in front of the camera?
Yeah, I was wondering if you ever cut like with that flower pot, maybe it was like on the ground and you moved it there. Do you ever like have any you're just talking so much about human interaction. Do you ever like interact with the pieces themselves before you end up taking a picture?
No, I don't at all. That's like
Wow.
a line I don't cross. But of course, this is like this is a whole can of worms for photographers with AI and just using Photoshop to enhance colors. It's like, what's the deal? But my deal with the audience is that whatever is in the picture was in the picture, and I didn't alter any of that. So, but it's a good question.
And yeah, I'm glad to hear that question, and I'm glad to hear the answer. And I think it's similar in any medium that you're working. You give yourself your own rules, and then you decide when to break them or not. And some people just always have their same way and never break the rules. And I think that's where it becomes really authentic. Your style becomes authentic to you. So another person might move things around and that would be all right for them, but not David. Janet Peterson says, beautiful show, David. I love how you talk about your daily practice and your more emotional response to your within 2 mile subject matter. Resonates with me. Bravo. I guess that's a statement. Did you have a question, Janet?
No, I just, as I move around my neighborhood, can you hear me? And paint, I just, and, you know, honoring what's around me. The way you were talking about how you address your subject matter, I just loved hearing about that. That's all.
Thank you so much, Janet.
And Catherine Orick says, painterly is exactly what I thought also. Did you have a question, Catherine?
Yes, I did. I mean, I look at the work and that's what, and maybe it's because I'm a painter, but what leaps out to me are the formal aspects that, great title, Organized Chaos. You know, when you look around the city and it looks so chaotic if you just look at the broad picture, but you find those formal elements that really cohere and make it make sense. And to me, that's those formal elements, the color and the shapes, are what make it seem very painterly. And I was wondering if you look to any painters in thinking about the your images, just any inspiration there for you, David?
Well, thank you for that comment. I am trying to make these photographs look really intentional. That's something, I wanted them to look, I want to take responsibility for everything that's in the photograph, the way a painter would. I've been influenced by a lot of painters, but none of them that specifically apply to the kinds of photographs I'm making, except with a possible exception there was a kind of precisionist school, American school, that included at times people like Edward Hopper, but also and Georgia O'Keeffe, but also some painters who we're into different planes and how light fell on it and vernacular subjects. But I've been influenced in my sense of my formal sense by like abstract expressionism and other kinds of painting, but none of them, I don't feel like I'm directly drawing from them in making these images.
Yeah, I was just curious about, I mean, it's just really, it's about looking and taking from, you know, all kinds of sources, but one can tell that you look at painting.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I would, if I could just make a suggestion or a comparison to like the Ashcan school of painters. They did similar, you know, like really lowbrow subject matter. So that could be a comparison.
There's people like Charles Sheeler, who was both a painter and a photographer. He was one of the main precisionist painters, or Charles Demuth. They have this thing about the vernacular and even like Ashcan type stuff. And they have this certain type of light and use of different planes that are lit by the light. And that like attachment to very careful composition and the edges of the composition.
Thanks, David. Now, Ani Buck has a question. Do people passing by ever speak to you about the scenes you're photographing?
I guess you mean while I'm photographing. Yes, definitely. You know, a lot of times people look at me kind of strangely, like, what is that? But then surprisingly often, people make some kind of positive comment, like they get what I'm doing. Just the other day, I was doing work that had all these shadows and curly metal things, and somebody said, reminds me of a Beardsley, and just kept walking. And people will give me like a thumbs up, or they'll say like, oh, that's a good one. So it does happen, but I'd say more often it happens that people look at me really strangely and like, why is he photographing this downspout or this gate with all these wires in it?
They probably think you're some kind of inspector that's going to give them a fine. Thanks, David. So the next one is for Leigh from Janet Peterson. Leigh, you've taken your scanography to a whole new level. They look like abstract landscapes.
Thank you. That's so nice.
And then Fred Bentheim says, David, your work strikes me as a compassionate response to the pathos of humanity. It's beneficial to be able to see the beauty of human folly. Humor and compassion are good survival skills in the city. Sorry, words in your mouth. Skills. And then a little bravo.
Thank you so much, Fred.
And then Leigh has a question for Amanda. Amanda, I enjoy hearing you discuss your new pieces. Compared to your old works, I feel like the shapes each have their own aura. I find that really interesting when thinking about these works being about older memories.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Grace. Can we see some more different images?
Amanda, do you have the next comment? Were you talking about
I guess not.
Robin's.
Yes. Well, you can kind of see it behind me.
Because it has a
We
lovely.
were talking about how it was matted. I liked how it also kind of like scrolls out, like it like has a lovely little curl to the sides.
Mhm.
Which it's not only like breaking that like square plane of the frame, but also kind of like occupying a little bit more space, which is lovely in person. You shall come see it.
Absolutely. Do you want to go back to Robin's, James, please? We'll just take a look at that. And then there's another question for Robin from Leigh Blanchard. Robin said, Leigh says, Robin, your work is equally successful when you utilize a lot of color and when you're using a more muted color palette. How do you decide what types of color to use? That's a good question. Is Robin here? There you are. You need to unmute, Robin.
Yeah. I don't know that I actually make a decision about that. You know, I mean, I see it. I see it a certain way and I just do that. I mean, I think that's just what, yeah, sorry for the airplane that just went by. I don't know that I make a lot of pre-decisions. I mean, sometimes like a series I'm doing right now, I know that I wanted a lot of black. And so each piece has a lot of black somewhere in the piece. So that was a pre-decision. But yeah, I kind of just go for what feels right to me in the moment. Sorry, don't have anything more.
No, that's fair.
Anything deeper than that.
And then our next question is from mysterious person, hashtag #1 Leigh Blanchard fan. Leigh, how much of each image is done via scanner versus other editing tools? What fraction of the image is done at each stage? Also, when and how do you decide when your image is complete?
The mystery person is my husband, so but I would say
Oh,
it's making me laugh. I would say that for these works that I think the majority were done in the scanner, it's kind of hard to say because they also look completely different once I started messing with them. So I guess in terms of like time put in, the majority I would say was scanner, in terms of like experimentation and figuring out the initial images. And then, yeah, the rest was some, editing tools and kind of a process of printing and rescanning as well. And I think similar to Robin's answer, actually, I think sometimes the image kind of says when it's done. So I don't know if, like Robin said, if I kind of decide more than it just kind of communicates to me that it's done.
makes sense. Really. So I think that, oh wait, here's another one from Mitch Haynick for David. David, so nice to hear you talk about your work. Despite the fact that there are no humans in the images, you and your process are so incredibly human.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Mitch is a great photographer, and it's a great compliment coming from him. And it's very, very true. It's like the photographs. I do photograph people also, but these photographs, which don't have people in them, are in many ways all about human activity and the marks left behind by human activity.
So I think we can open it up to anybody. If you just want to unmute and ask your question, please feel free. And if you have a question about a specific piece, we could, James has been graciously finding the works for us. Questions or comments or jokes are welcome.
Actually, I just wanted to tell Robin that it's a direction that her new work is going in, and I haven't been able to get to the gallery yet, but I'm hoping to get over there the end of this week and see the work in person. That new piece, the unframed piece, looks really interesting and looks like something I should go and definitely see in person.
I have a question for Robin on your new direction. Are they all interiors? Would this series be interiors with the wallpaper, or, I mean?
Actually, no, they're not interiors at all.
Okay.
They're actually more mythological.
Ah,
The theme is more mythological.
Hmm.
So I think I really don't have a particular focus on subject matter. I really like to deal with all kinds of things, whatever strikes me. But I have in the past done a lot of drawings around my house.
have fun with this. This seems like a really fun direction, and I'm not fun, but just
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting to try to figure out, how to show it without that frame. It's a
Yeah.
challenge.
yeah.
And because, then they're going to go into someone's home,
Right.
hopefully at some point. And is that going to work for a client? I don't know,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well, I think the edge work is compelling. I think it's really interesting. It suggests decay almost. I mean, I don't know. With the wallpaper, it was just a really, I just feel like the whole piece has been thought through really well.
Well, first I did the drawing and I have all these wallpapers and I kept thinking, God, this wallpaper is so busy. Is this really going to work? And I actually asked a fellow artist and she said, no, don't do that. But I kept going back to it. I couldn't leave it alone. I kept going back to that particular wallpaper. So I had to go with my gut, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
No is the comment you need to steel your resolve to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. Don't do that.
I have a quick question for David.
Hi.
Hi, David. So you talked about kind of themes running through, or things you're looking that attract you, like graffiti and things like that. But I also see things like beverages, wires, or connections and things connecting. When you're walking around, do like certain kinds of objects catch your eye, or do you usually see the whole picture?
A lot of times, there'll be a little hook, or it works the other way. Sometimes, like there's that picture of the that I call Borg, which is like an ad for a beauty parlor, but it has this electrical box in place of one of the eyes of the model. And I photographed that several times, but the time it worked, I thought, yeah, that's the one. The only time it worked was that I walked by and that coffee cups were there, and it's almost like there's steam coming off the coffee cups. And it was just that little extra element. So sometimes that might grab me first, but other times I'll see the whole thing first, and then it'll have that little extra something that makes it work.
Thank you.
You.
Actually, I have a comment for David about, you know, the gate. Can we look at the gate one again with all the wires? Not, yeah, that one. Every time I see this, I love this one.
Oh,
And
thanks.
one of the thing I love about it so much is that yellow wire looks like you drew on top of the photograph. Just to me, it looks almost like a cartoon that you did on top of it. And I don't know, I just love that quality of it, that it looks like a drawing.
Yeah, that wire kind of makes the picture.
Yeah.
It draws your eye to it, and I don't know. I mean, it's like I don't even know what it's for. I don't even
And I
know
love
it.
that it's almost like floating, you know, sort of floating on top. I guess that's why it gives it that quality of something like that you drew on top of the photograph.
Yeah, that's a really good comment. It is. It's got like a dimensionality to it.
Yeah.
It's like in a separate plane almost.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Huh, thanks.
I agree very much with Robin's comment. And I know there was the remark that your work is painterly, but I also see it's the graphic delight, like looking at the at lines of how there are all these lines drawn in our landscape. And you know, I think there can be the connection to networking and communication, that kind of thing. But there's also just such a joy in looking at these elements, whether it's color or line or shape. And so I think that is part of the extreme draw to this work, that the viewer wants to just kind of immerse themselves in, yes, in chaos, but it's a wonderful chaos, and a very rewarding chaos.
Thank you very much, James.
Can I make a comment about this particular photograph, which is that you can tell stories to yourself, like the fence itself with the curves. It feels like part of that curve escaped onto the wall. There's so much energy when you start to really let yourself relax and look at the piece. So that curve went wild on the wall, you know. That's what's so special about all of these photos.
That's really cool. Somebody else was saying that where the in the middle of the photograph, where the stucco is kind of eroded, that it looks like surf, and that they're getting their eye pulled into the picture that way. One thing that I thought was interesting, that I kind of learned from this photograph myself, is I don't think it would have worked without that little piece of aluminum siding in the corner that somehow lets you out of the plane, or puts you back into some grounding. And I started looking at the other pieces, and I saw that I'm doing that a lot, that whereas in the past I would have tried to close things off into a filled up rectangle, that I was starting to puncture that with little places where the image could escape into the sky or someplace else. So this was a pretty important image for me in terms of understanding what I was doing in this whole series.
Thank you so much, David. And I noticed that too, what you're saying about the little things along the edges. And it's pretty fascinating to look at in the gallery, to see all the pieces that do that. And that some are that have more depth that isn't typical of your work in the past. I'm thinking of that one piece that is kind of going down the alley, or it's not really an alley. What is it?
It is an alley.
Is it? Okay. Oh, this is, yeah. But it still has that, that contained feeling of a David style.
It's quite an alley.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, this has been a wonderful talk. Thank you so much, artists, and thank you so much, everyone who's here today. I just want to mention our next show is on my cheat sheet. Is called Mapping. It's a juried exhibition. The curator is Maddie Rosenberg. The show is going to be up from June 29th to July 30th. And the opening reception is Thursday, June 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. So we invite you all to come by. And I hope everyone has a beautiful rest of your Sunday.
Thank you very much, Karen and James and the other folks who worked on producing this.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all.
Yes.
This is great.
And there'll be an artist talk for the mapping juried show as well. So you should all be on our mailing list, and it'll also be on the website.
How do we get on your mailing list?
Amanda?
By registering, you should now be on our mailing list.
Make sure.
Okay, great.
But so we usually send something out once every Monday. If you don't see something on Monday, you can go to our website and sign up there. Sometimes things go to spam.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Coz.
Bye. Bye, everyone.